Most of us, if given a choice, would rather walk on top of the mountains than tread down into the valleys. Most of us make great efforts to try to avoid conflict, pain and suffering and difficulties coming into our lives. Many times, we're confronted with situations that we feel there's no way this can be anything good. It even makes us question God at times, to asking, God, what have I done for this event to come into my life? Or God, what do you have in mind by having me to endure the things that you've allowed to come my way? The disciples had walked with Jesus for 3 years. He had encountered thousands of people. He had made the blind see, the deaf to hear, the dumb to speak, the crippled to be able to walk, the diseased to be made whole. He had raised the dead back to life. He had driven demons from people possessed. He went about going and doing good, showing love, mercy, compassion, elevating the rights of women, elevating the rights of children, showing that God loved all people equally. All had worth, all had value. And then a day came where they nailed him to the tree. People's hopes were dashed. The excitement and enthusiasm that they held for the future was crushed. Triumph was turned into tragedy. Nowhere do you see the completeness of the transformation of tragedy quite so well as in the attitudes of the disciples following the crucifixion of Jesus. These hand-chosen people had walked with him for 3 years, had heard him teach for 3 years, had watched the ministries of God being performed at his hands, and now they are defeated. They're depressed. They're despairing following the crucifixion. But on the day of the resurrection, and the weeks that shortly followed, triumph began to come about again out of tragedy. These disciples, with the news that Jesus was now raised from the dead, began spreading throughout the whole Mediterranean world, telling about Jesus. These handful of people become a nucleus of a message that would spread throughout the world and turn the world right side up. One verse in the story of Jesus' Easter night described this transformation. John 20:20 says, and then the disciples were glad when they saw the Lord. Hearts that had been broken, tears streaming down their faces, was now transformed by a smile across their face. Joy in their hearts, peace in their lives, because they now knew that Jesus was no longer dead, but he was alive. The verse we read just a few minutes ago said that standing at the foot of the cross were some women. Now Jesus had told his disciples plainly this truth: I will be put to death. I will be buried. But after 3 days, I will rise. He told them plainly. They didn't get it. Possibly because they didn't want to hear it. Even though they had walked with him and lived with him for 3 years, in the back of their minds, they still was expecting Jesus to be the political Messiah, to overthrow the yoke of the Roman Empire, to establish an earthly, physical kingdom. But he had come to establish a kingdom, spiritual kingdom. And when he did not live up to their expectations, they had failed to learn by faith what they were supposed to learn. When they put him in the tomb, I'll tell you what the disciples should have done. They should have packed a picnic lunch. They should have camped out by the stone that was rolled across the tomb. Had they really understood what Jesus was up to, they would not have wanted to witness or miss angels coming down rolling the stone across the way. They would have wanted to have been there when the light emanated from within the dark tomb. They would have wanted to have been there when their resurrected Lord come out of the tomb and demonstrated power over death. But instead, they were hiding. Those who were last at the cross included Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Jesus, and the Mary who accompanied Mary Magdalene to the tomb on that first Easter morning. When tragedy was transformed into victory, the people who knew it first, who experienced it first, were women. Now, Mary Magdalene was from Magdala, which is located on the shore of the Sea of Galilee on the south end of the plain of Gennesaret. It was known as a wild, immoral town. Mary Magdalene was a woman that was possessed by 7 demons. And Jesus cast 7 demons out of her. She's often identified as being the woman who sat at the feet of Jesus and washed his feet. Mary Magdalene was not a very good person prior to meeting Jesus. But when she met Jesus, he completely transformed her life. And she was the first witness of the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. When she got to the tomb, she saw Jesus. She thought he was a gardener. Her heart was broken because the body of Jesus was no longer in the tomb. She asked the gardener, where did they take the body of Jesus? Because I want to go get it, show him honor, and prepare his body for burial. She didn't recognize him by the way he looked in his glorified body. But the moment he spoke her name, she knew exactly who he was. Tragedy had been transformed. Mary, the mother of Jesus, faithful to the end, she'd been one of the very last people to leave the cross when Jesus died. Tragedy marked her heart and her life by the public execution of her son Jesus. But the moment when she saw her son resurrected from the dead, her tragedy was turned into triumph. This woman who loved Jesus since she had given him birth, loved Jesus more because of the grace that he would show her by the power of his resurrection. For them, as well as for you and me, tragedy can be transformed because Jesus has rose from the dead. I want to tell you something. The disciples had a hard time initially believing Jesus had rose from the dead. But the public figures who had crucified Jesus had no problem with that. They absolutely was terrified of the fact that Jesus could do what he said that he had done. Never before had they ever seen anyone die with such grace, dignity. Never before had they seen anyone crucified in such a fashion as Jesus, hang on the cross and ask his Father to forgive them for what they were doing. Never had they ever witnessed from the cross a man extend forgiveness to another sinner hanging on the cross alongside of them. The resurrection is one of the greatest stories that is proven to be true. I had a seminary professor one time that took his daughter to New York City. She wanted to go see a show, Snow White. The movie theater was filled full of children of all different ages. During the performance, when the wicked witch appeared, children were terrified, and they all began to scream of the wickedness of the witch that was standing there in front of them. And at the height of the witch running around and screaming and hollering and laughing, a little girl stood to her feet when she heard all of the screaming of the other kids in the theater. The little girl turned around, faced the audience, and she began to yell as loud as she could, "Please, listen to me! Listen to me! Listen to me!" And the theater became quiet, and the little girl said, "My mommy has read this story to me 50 times. And let me tell you something. It works all right in the end. It works out all right in the end. Don't be afraid." When the women went to the tomb, seeing the resurrected Jesus, they ran to go tell the disciples the good news that defeat was about to be turned into victory. Tragedy was about to be totally transformed. I'm going to tell you what. When I was in college, I had to study a lot of psychology. When you read the story about the disciples standing at the foot of the cross, there's 4 basic emotions all of these disciples went through. And every one of these 4 can be related to you and me here this morning. The 4 emotions that was present in these gentlemen were these: despair, there was shame, there was fear, and there was Christ forsakenness, we'll call it, abandonment. Feeling like they had been abandoned by God Himself. Despair was one of these disciples' feelings. They had cast their lots with Jesus. Many had given up their careers. Many had laid aside family ties. They had really believed that Jesus was not only going to be the Savior of the world, but He was going to be the Savior for the nation of Israel. They had cast their fortunes, their reputations, their lives in being identified with this man. Then he had been arrested, beaten, crucified, put to death. Their hopes had been shattered. Their dreams had been dashed to the ground. And I can promise you there's people sitting in this room right now has experienced the depths of despair in their life at one time or another. We wonder if the things to which we've given our lives are going to work out. If the gospel will make an indelible impact upon our world. We've all had to face crises, pain, shortcomings, been driven to our knees. And we wondered if we were able to survive this ordeal with which we've been given. But with the resurrection of Jesus, our despair can be turned into hope. We can remember that Christ is alive and well and active in our world. God's made a promise to you and me. He will meet every need we ever have. He will never reject us. He will never turn His back on us. In all things, we can have His presence with us in our life. And He will give us the strength and the courage to face those. In the end, Christ will be proclaimed as the Lord of all. We too can face the shame that the disciples felt. After all, these men that had walked closely with Jesus for 3 years, how did they all behave in the end of Jesus' life? Did he act very admirably? Some of them denied him. Some of them abandoned him. Some had run away. Some had hidden. They had all forsaken Jesus and fled. Only one of them was standing at the foot of the cross. That was John. Where was the rest of them at? Despite the loud boast that Peter had made, he had denied Jesus. Judas had betrayed him. All of them had fled. At the time when Jesus needed him the most. You and I can identify with the feelings of shame they had. How many times in our life have we not acted with a very Christ-like attitude? How many times have we willfully or out of ignorance not lived up to the standards that God wanted us to live up to? How many times have we denied Him? How many times have we put our hands to the yoke of the plow and turned our heads around? How many times have we let opportunities just flip by us or go by us where we could have said something, could have done something, could have impacted someone's life, and we didn't do it? There's been too many times that we've not witnessed or ministered or been good stewards or simply practiced obedience. Does Christ reject us? No. He encourages us to stand up, repent, put our hands back on the plow, keep moving forward. Christ comes to us in our shame to offer us forgiveness and to give us courage. During World War I, there was a young army officer that was given command of a platoon of 100 men. He was given a direct order to hold this bridge. In the face of the onslaught of the Germans, he ordered all of his men to retreat. The Germans took the bridge and they attacked the next platoon in line, and they were decimated. This young army officer was arrested and was going to be court-martialed when this young man's commanding officer said, "I understand what fear is, and I understand what courage is. And courage is nothing more than a person having fear, but willing to stand up and do his very best in the face of imminent death." He said, "I'm not going to court-martial you. I'm going to show you I still believe in you." And he took the boy out of the jury room and said, "I'm going to give you a command of 10 men. I'm going to give you another opportunity to prove yourself." He put him in charge of protecting another little bridge. This time it's only 10 men. 100 Germans come up against his 10. He again felt the fear of facing death. But he had remembered that his commanding officer had trusted him and had given him another opportunity. This time, the guy with his 10 other men held the bridge. 8 of the 10 young guys with him perished. He himself was wounded 5 times. But yet he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor because he held his ground, stood firm. This man was asked, "Why did you stand when all seemed to fail?" And his words were this: "What else could I do? I failed my commanding officer once, and yet he trusted me. I could not let him down." You know what causes you and me to be able to get up time after time after time when we fail God? Because deep within our hearts and deep within our minds, we know He loves us. We know one day we're going to stand in front of God and give account of ourselves. Look what God has given to you and me. He has given to us forgiveness, hope, peace, the assurance of spending eternity with Him in heaven. That gives us strength and courage to rise up from the ashes, shake off the feelings of our shames, and say, God, restore me again to a place of usefulness, because we know He will. A lot of people live their life in fear. We're living in uncertain times. We're living with a lot of crazy people in this world. We are. We're living in days of uncertainty. The economy, jobs. It seems to be that Satan is hard at work, trying to steal away people's affections, trying to decimate the power of the church. He is actively attacking families and destroying the families. We're seeing generations of people's lives being destroyed by drugs. We're seeing crime at epidemic levels. Children in school shooting children. The world's in a state of mess. We do have things that can cause us to have alarm. Life is faced with fear more times than faith. If you don't believe me, the sale of locks, burglar alarms, and protection devices shows us how deep the world is in fear. One of the biggest businesses today is selling protection devices for people's homes. A day used to be you could unlock your doors, never lock your doors and go to bed. You better not do that now. You unlock your cars up or people will ransack your cars. People will kill you for the shoes you got on or for the few dollars you had in your pocket. The devil is playing on our physical fears. But God gives us the assurance. God does not want you and me to live in fear. He wants us to face our fears. Rely upon His strength to get us through. God's resurrection removes our fears. We don't have to live in fear because we can live by faith because we serve a living God. We can live with the confidence that nothing will come into our life that God has not ordained to be allowed to be there. And since you and I cannot control what's going to come into our life, we can only properly respond to how are we going to deal with what comes into our life. Whatever it is that comes into your life and my life, we should only say this: God, I don't have a clue why it's here. You do. Help me, God, to accept what it is that I'm now dealing with and somehow use it for my advantage and yours. That removes the fear. But the worst feeling of all is the feeling that you can have that you've been forsaken by God. These disciples, of watching the death of Christ on the cross and being buried, they really believed they had been abandoned by God. And having lost Christ, they lost their joy and zest for living. Having known Christ and the life that He had brought to them, they just simply came to the conclusion that they could not simply move on. But the resurrection assures you and me, as it assured the disciples, that we have not been forsaken by Christ. Christ defeated death that day. And I'm going to make you a promise. I don't care what giant is in your path this morning. My God's bigger than any problem you've got. My God's bigger than any problem I have. He's bigger than any fear, any doubt, any worry. Nothing can stand before the power of Christ. And that power can be known in a human life. God knows you. Personally. Before you was created in your mama's womb, God looked down through time and saw you. He knows everything there is to know about you. your interests, your likes, your dislikes, strengths, weaknesses. He knew every choice you'd make, every success, every failure, every triumph, every tragedy. And he made you anyway. He loves you. And the book of Romans says this: the gifts and the callings of God are without repentance. You know what that means? Simply, no matter how bad you are, God's not sorry he made you. God's not sorry he went to the cross of Calvary and died for you. Every mistake you've ever made, God loves you and accepts you anyway. God's made it plain for you. There's a purpose for you being here. You're born in this day and age because of God's divine will. You could have been born in the 17, 18, 1900. You're born and living right now for a specific reason. And that is for you to come to know Him, give your life to Him, and allow Him to use you to make a difference in the world in which you live. When you allow God to turn your tragedy into triumph, you are beginning to live in faith. God does not want you to live in despair, in shame. He doesn't want you to live second class. He wants you to live first class. He wants for you to stand up boldly, face the world, and make a difference in the world in which you live. When Jesus was raised from the dead, tragedy was transformed. Life was now given to bring about promise and hope. The early people that saw the resurrected Christ received a message of hope. From out of that crowd, faithful followers that had been living in tragedy became totally transformed. And the 5th Marine Corps in Korea, during the time of the Korean conflict, there was 18,000 American soldiers standing 100 yards across from 100,000 communists. The degrees that day was 42 degrees below zero. Looking across just the expanse of a football field, these weary, half-frozen soldiers stood around dirty trucks, eating meals from tin cans, trying to eat cold beans with a trench knife. The soldiers' clothes were stiff as an ironing boards. Their faces was covered with crust and mud and frost. A man looked at his partner and he says, "If I were God and I could grant you anything you wished, what would you like the most?" And without hesitation, the young soldier turned to the other soldier and says, "That God would give me one more day to live." That's a pretty simple request, wasn't it? That God would give me one more day to live. Because of that, he had a hope that he could live just one more day. He wasn't asking for more days than that. Just one more. You know what that one more day represents? Faith. Hope. It's been said that in every crowd that Jesus faced was that Jesus was never really interested in the size of the crowd. Because no matter how many people's in that crowd, he could single out an individual. Throughout the life of Jesus, as he simply walked slowly through the crowds, he ministered to the needs of people. He gave people, individual people, the opportunity to encounter him, to interact with him. This is not ended. Christ has got a personal relationship with you and with me. He puts you and me in the crowds of people. When you and I move through the crowds of people, do we see just the masses? Or are we able to single out the individuals that compose the mass? Has Christ singled you out of the crowd for His grace? If He has, are you allowing Him to use you to be an agent of His grace and mercy? If He's ruled to you, are you willing to share that with other people? Will you allow God to give you the strength for you to stand out in a crowd? Will you allow God to use you to be His eyes, His voice, His ears, His hands? What does God want from you and me? The Bible says God owns the hills. All the cattle's on the hills. He owns everything. What does God want from you and me? Us. No strings attached. I'll give you me, God. I'm going to give you an offering. I'm going to give you me. These women that first went to the tomb became the first people in a long succession line of people that's met Jesus, had their lives changed. We're the generations here now. What does God need us to do? To take what we know, what we've experienced out of these four walls, to where we work and live and play, shop, worship. Let our light shine for other people to see. Let's stand and we sing our offertory song, the offering.